Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Think Big. I'm your host, Akia Garnett. Let me ask you a question. Are you always late? Do your friends have to tell you to show up earlier than everybody else? What about fashionably late? Is that a part of your regular daily repertoire? How and when we show up affects everything we do and how others perceive us as well. If you've been getting to that project for a long time but have yet to make real progress, or simply feel like you're always racing against the clock, this episode is for you. I'll be joined by my friend and your procrastination prevention partner, author, and speaker, Eric Twiggs. Enjoy this quick message about the student fair, and then my conversation with Eric Twiggs. Stop wasting your time.
The Black Student Fund has been around for more than 50 years, and it served as an important resource for many, many families in the area who may not have always felt welcomed to independent schools. For school heads and administrators like me, it's a bit of a party and celebration coming to this, not only seeing other school personnel, but to meet so many families, some of whom have traveled from a distance, and I think they know that this is the one fair where they're going to see all the schools in the area.
Independent schools are such a wonderful resource for all the families, but particularly for families of color who may not have necessarily access that we need them to have. So this is a place where you can literally see every kind of education possible in the independent school world. So we have to give everyone an equal playing field. The Black Student Fund allows us to do that.
We provide more insight into the admissions process, which has become more complicated than 50 years ago, so that families understand what they're going to have to do to actually apply to schools, complete the testing that's required for admission to the schools, and to position themselves through the financial aid process.
What I'm trying to get out of it is just basically making sure that I can give him better than what I had when I was growing up, and giving him a better start and the best education that I can give them all.
Luke is a special kid. He's pretty advanced, so we were looking for something that's affordable that we could get him in.
Today is a day when people learn that there is hundreds of millions of dollars of financial aid that's given out by these schools. Today is a day of people making connections about their dream for their kids.
I would say that the Washington, D.C. area may have some of the most diverse independent schools in the country, and I think there's a direct link with the Black Student Fund. I think it's been transformative for many individuals, but also for the schools.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for being my guest, Eric. How are you?
Excellent, Akia. Thank you for having me on your show.
Awesome. Well, why don't we just take a few moments for you to just let our audience know exactly what your background is? I think that will help this conversation.
Okay, so in the book, I talk about how I've had over 28,000 coaching sessions. And that's really where I got a lot of the experiences that I talk about and was able to articulate some of the challenges and struggles people have with procrastination. So I spent over 8 years of 12 to 15 coaching sessions per day, 5 days a week,
Wow.
just talking to different entrepreneurs. And then prior to that, I have 10 years experience of supervising 500 or more people, having 500 employees reporting to me. And then for the last 6 years, I've been a professional speaker.
Wow, so that's pretty impressive, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing your book with me. I have been sharing this book this week, and I'd like for you to take a look at it. It's called The Discipline of Now, and it's 12 practical principles to overcome procrastination. Thank you again for sending the book to me because it's just great. I mean, it's not a book that you read from cover to cover, of course. I am reading it and still on the first exercise. I want to take my time and make sure I get it right. But how did you come up with each step?
Well, it's interesting. So when you look at procrastination, it's got so many different layers to it. So one thing from dealing with all those people I just mentioned, if there's someone that's stuck, 80% of the issue I found dealt with their mindset. and only 20% was like a skill set or a tactical issue.
Right.
So I've learned the hard way that before we can really unpack procrastination, we have to address the mindset. So I came up with a model, and the first step on that pyramid is your attitude.
Right. I mean, one of the things you mentioned in the book is that most people think they know what procrastination means already.
Right.
What and how do you actually define that term?
Well, procrastination is delaying the task that you know you need to do. And you know within yourself, there's certain things that you know you should be doing.
Right.
You know you should be working out. You know you should be doing certain tasks, but for various reasons, we don't do them. One thing I talk about in the book is that we can't confuse prudence with procrastination.
Right.
So sometimes because you're not taking action, it could be a good thing. For example, if you're starting a business, it may not be the right season for you to jump right into it
Right.
and just abandon your full-time job.
Correct.
There's a season to do your research. But procrastination is when you know it's time to move. You
Right.
know
Yeah.
it's time to do
Well, there
something.
must be some term in between prudence and procrastination then, do you think?
Well,
Let me ask you, for the topic procrastination and your book, how does it differ from other time management books that are out there?
Well, and I'm an avid reader.
Right.
And one of the things that frustrated me was a lot of the books provided you with kind of cookie cutter, one size fits all answers, like, oh, you have to be an early bird, don't check email before noon. But that, depending on what you do, that could cause problems for you.
Right.
So I designed my book to be tailor-made and provide specific tools based off of wherever you are, based off of your personality, based off of genetics. You can find things within the book to help you out. And the other thing is that I made it short, quick, and
Right.
easy to read.
It is a great read. isn't it?
100 pages.
I know. I mean, and the fact that you had Dr. Willie Jolly write the foreword is amazing.
Yes.
Congratulations to
Thank
you on
you.
that. It was a
Thank
great
you.
foreword.
Thank
and
you.
even that was right to the punch. So,
Yes.
Again, kudos for that. Now, who exactly is this book for?
Well, it's for that individual who has the entrepreneurial mindset that's looking to go from good to great. That's really who the book is for. So you can have the entrepreneurial mindset and be working within an organization. When I say entrepreneurial mindset, it's that desire to really take control of your future. You're not just sitting back waiting for someone to pick you. You're taking your career into your own hands, and you could be an entrepreneur, obviously, but that's who the book is designed for. You're trying to take it to that next level.
Right.
And when you're going from good to great, time management is just critical.
Absolutely.
Because as you're starting to become successful, there's more demands on your time, and you can't do everything.
I mean, and I have known you for quite some time, and you have always been an advocate for time management.
Yes.
And people tackling, their time so that they
Yes.
can make the most out of their days. But this whole thing of procrastination, it's a whole different layer.
Yes.
Why specifically, outside of time management, do you think people need to jump on to procrastination and just eliminate it?
Well, because procrastination has hidden costs. And it's interesting because it's like a silent killer.
Right.
When you put something off and it seems like things go okay, let's say you've got a presentation, you wait till the last minute to do it.
Right.
You do it, seems like everything's fine, you don't get fired or anything like that. you think everything is okay,
Yeah.
but everything's really not okay.
Right.
In the book, I talk about this link between innovation and preparation.
Right.
And a lot of times, especially if you're doing a creative project, it's not going to be as good
Right.
if you don't take the time and let your ideas develop.
Yeah.
And you find yourself not getting ahead,
Right.
and you don't understand why. And it could be because the quality of your work wasn't good because you procrastinated.
One of the things I love that you say is that some people will say, "Oh, I'm pressure prompted. I work really, really well under pressure." And
Right.
that is when I'm
Sure.
most creative. When I'm really at the 11th hour. I love that you tackle that, and you just dispel that whole notion.
Right,
Huh?
like I said, it's just justification for procrastination, right?
Right.
Oh, I work well under pressure.
You also have this quadrant in the book.
Yes.
And I thought that was pretty interesting in
Yes.
terms of the procrastination
Yes.
and innovation and creativity. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so basically the take from the quadrant is that the creativity increases, the more preparation you give, the more time that you have to prepare. So ideally, you want to start early enough where you can be creative and your ideas get a chance to incubate. I mean, that's really the biggest takeaway. And I talk about this quadrant. One of the quadrants is where, you get called on at the last minute,
Right.
and you have to deliver. And let's say it's a minister, and you have to deliver that sermon. You get last minute notice. But you can deliver because you've got so much time in and you've practiced.
Right.
And you've gotten so skilled at your craft. But people look at that from the outside and think, oh, well, I can do that too.
Right.
He got last minute notice and it went great. But no, you're not in his situation because he's been doing this for years and years and years, and all his hours of preparation have prepared him for that. So it's just really understanding the relationship between the time and how creativity can help improve the quality of the product.
Why do you think that, and I'm sure you've done this in all of your research, that people actually slow down or not at all approach a task that they need to do? I know it's, we talked earlier in the show about, that people need to do it, but why do you think they just hold off from it? Is it fear? Is it just the lack of knowing what to do?
Fear is huge. Fear is one of the biggest reasons that people procrastinate. So when let's say you have a project, right? And you feel anxiety about it. Maybe it's a big presentation in front of all your supervisors. I know early in my career, that's something that really gave me a lot of anxiety. Doing a presentation for my boss and my boss's boss. Right. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So you have the fear. And then when you start procrastinating, that causes you to have more anxiety. Right. So you have anxiety when you think about the task, and then when you start procrastinating, you start feeling anxiety because the deadline is looming. Right. So, but fear is the number one thing. It's fear of success, believe it or not. There's fear of failure, and then there's that fear of the unknown. Those are kind of the common things that I see in just all the people that I interact with.
Right. Now, in your book, you mentioned the 12 steps. On average, how long do you think it takes people to get through the whole, 12 steps, and then in that, or 12 principles rather, and then in that, at the end, are they cured?
Well, I don't think you're ever permanently cured. That's why I call it the discipline of now. So it's a discipline, meaning that it's something that you've got to consistently be mindful of, and you've got to consistently practice. Like I even say for myself, I open the book up. Hey, my name is Eric, and I'm a procrastinator. I just say that not because I'm trying to own that label, but because I have to constantly practice the behaviors that I talk about in the book. Yeah. And really, the time, it really depends on that individual. So in the book, I talk about the different personality types. Like I would say, like the driver type A personality, they tend to grasp on the habits. Like I think you and I are probably that type A personality. We tend to pick up habits easier. But someone that's one of the other personality, it may take them longer. Right. And here's the thing: it's okay if it takes longer, as long as you're working the process. And I've designed the book to be interactive. Right. If you've probably seen it where it says stop. It's great. Yeah. Stop right here.
And you were really direct too.
Okay, you read a book and you're thinking, okay, I'll come back to that exercise. No, don't come back to the exercise. Right. So it just don't. I would tell the reader, don't get focused on how long it takes. Just focus on consistently working the process.
Right. One of the things you also mentioned is being at the lowest state. And your example was being in your favorite chair, watching a game, got your favorite drink. Right. And if you were any closer, if you were any more flat, you'd be on the floor. Right. And how we like to stay in that place. And then, of course, we panic when we realize that we've wasted, and I hate to say wasted, but we spent time doing something that, we are going to probably regret. Yes. How did you get to that actual analogy? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I think it's easy to settle into a comfort zone. And so a lot of times, we think that it's about, being in a bad situation. Sometimes the biggest enemy is a comfortable situation. Right. It could be a job. You're called to do this big thing on this large scale, but your job is comfortable, you're good at it, it pays the bills, everybody's dependent. So it's easy to stay comfortable than to launch out and to do what you're really supposed to do. That's kind of where the analogy of the comfy chair. Because you'll stay there forever. And so one of the things I mentioned in the book is, and this has been kind of controversial, I think sometimes it's better to hate the situation that you're in, because you're going to feel motivated to move. Right. That pain, that discomfort, you're thinking, and I've been through this, where you look within and you say, there's got to be something better. There's got to be something more for me. Right. But if it's just something that you're mildly dissatisfied with, you can stay there forever.
Right. I mean, I do think that is controversial. I know some people say you don't run from something, but you walk towards something. And so when you hate something, then you really want to get away from it. But I do appreciate what you're saying regarding using that as energy
Right.
to move forward, to get out of that situation. So for people who are listening, what can they do today to begin combating procrastination? What is that first step in the book?
Well, the big thing you can do, you just want something simple, just eliminate the distractions. You know how you have your cell phone and you got the chimes, you got the alerts, you
Right.
got the notifications. You just cut those all off. That will go a long way,
Right.
because we get so distracted, and it's like people get addicted to the slot machines because of this idea of the principle of random rewards. We get this dopamine rush when we get the next email, the next text message,
Right.
and it's much easier when we get that notification, start looking at our phone instead of doing that task that we're supposed to be doing. That's one thing. That's one basic step you can take to delay, put off procrastination.
Right. I mean, they've got all types of jokes. We're on this kind of time, for a particular culture. People, say, oh, our clocks are different. Some people are always early or always on time, and others are just comfortable strolling in late. Do you really think that there is a difference between the way people perceive time?
Yes, I think that's huge, and I think it can cause arguments in a lot of cases because, like, I have friends where, so for me, if you tell me that this thing starts at 9 o'clock, for me, 9 o'clock means 8:45.
Right.
That's when I need to get there. I need to kind of make sure I'm ready. But for some people, 9 o'clock means 9-ish.
Right.
9:10, 9:15, and they're okay with that. So it can create some friction because people do have different meaning, apply different meanings to deadlines.
Right.
For some people, deadlines are just a suggestion.
Right. I know quite a few people.
Oh yeah, so do I.
Right. And it can be frustrating.
Absolutely.
But I guess you just kind of learn to go with the flow in that instance. Knowing when people are going to show up, you kind of, let them know what time you want them to show up, and then you show up a few minutes later because they were going to be late anyways.
But I do think it helps to communicate, though.
Yeah.
And to kind of, especially if it's in a work environment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had employees that have the same thing. If I say the meeting starts at 9 o'clock,
Right.
I have employees I know they're going to be 8:30,
Right.
sitting in the front row, ready to write. And I've got others that are going to stroll in at the last second blaming traffic.
Right.
So you really have to communicate your expectations. You can't assume that, and the mistake I used to make, I assumed everybody viewed time the same way that I do.
Was that always, is that innate to you? Was it, as a child, did you see time the same way, or was it kind of a learned habit?
Well, when it came to deadlines, I saw my father. And my father, he got up at the same time every day. He went out every day. And to this day, he's never late to anything. Like, if he's late, I would be shocked. I'm like, there's something wrong with me if he's late. But that's kind of, I've modeled that. So a lot of my passion for being on time started by watching him.
Right. And does it annoy you when others are not on time?
Yes. Yeah, it can. It can.
Right. When do you speak up about it, and when do you just kind of say, "Oh, I'm glad you showed up, and let's keep on moving."
Well, definitely, if it's someone that works for me, I'm going to acknowledge it one way or another.
Right.
Because I think it's important, and because a lot of times, again, with the perceptions, people perceive if you're late. There's some people you can be late, and it's like, oh, hey, no worry. And it really depends on what it is too.
Yeah.
But if it's a social event,
Right.
that's one thing. But if it's something business related and we've got, timelines and people waiting, and because sometimes people set time in a business setting.
Right.
If I have a client, they've set time to meet with me at a particular time. If I show up late, they're thinking, oh, he doesn't care about my time because I could have been doing something else.
Right.
I delayed this time with my family.
Right.
So those are things we just need to think about when it comes to that.
When we opened, you said that, and you mentioned this in the book, that you are a procrastinator. Now, I know you mentioned just a moment ago that you're always on time, and those two things are different. What led you to take on that term procrastination for yourself? What did that mean to you?
Well, it just kind of some of my experiences. So for me, being on time wasn't the big issue. It was just about really being clear on what it is I wanted to do. And I think a lot of people procrastinate because they're not really motivated. They're not clear on ultimately what it is that they want to do.
Right.
And that's a key thing. And I talk about in the book some experiences that I had. So it kind of started with, I was in college. I talk about this in the book, and and at that time, I figured I had plenty of time. I'm going to have fun. I want to go to parties. I had a close friend of mine, and he was the total opposite. He was in the Marine Corps. He was very focused. He was disciplined. He was always telling me, hey, Eric, you got to get serious. Come on, man. I'm like, hey, we got to go to this party next week.
Right.
And so we would talk, and he would just say, Eric, you got to get it together. And then weeks went by, I didn't hear from him, and his mom called me to let me know that he passed away in a car accident.
Oh, no.
And it really changed how I thought about time, and that, hey, you know what? I don't have the time that I think. And so then I really first I started focusing on, okay, I've got to make money. I've got to be successful in business. This time is short.
Right.
And I got to a point where I was successful, but then I looked in the mirror and realized I hated what I was doing.
Right.
I wasn't happy. And so that made me go within and figure out, okay, what is it that I want to do?
Right.
And so once I got clarity, that's really when things started coming together, and overcoming procrastination became much easier. So like now, I can wake up at 4:00 in the morning without an alarm clock.
Wow.
Because I really look forward to the day. I look forward to helping people. I look forward to talking about the book.
Yeah. Do you think people can waste their time in life?
Absolutely.
And then, wake up one day and it really is too late?
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty optimistic, and I like to believe that, you can do what you want if you put your mind to it, and if you're focused and you're dedicated. But there are some things that time can pass you by.
Absolutely.
And you miss your opportunity.
Right.
How do you deal with that when you're working with someone who truly has procrastinated quite a few years or so? How do you work with them to create some kind of a plan that makes sense for them?
Well, I think you can still find significance. I think there's a window that may close on doing certain things, but I think you can still find meaning, you can still find fulfillment, you can still find significance. So it's about, let's move forward.
Right.
The yesterday ended last night. Yes, you wasted time, but let's move forward. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? And you can kind of establish new goals.
Thank you, Eric. Stay right there. We'll be back with Eric Twiggs. I've been spending time this week with Eric Twiggs, and he is an author and motivational speaker, and he calls himself your prevention, your procrastination prevention partner. And again, this has been an exciting experience for me going through your book, not only because I've known you for a while, but because I know that you are an avid reader.
Yes.
So to see you take all the things that you read and the time that you spend with folks and put it into a publication like this that is so easy to read is just fantastic. One of the things I know from the work that I've done in terms of vision and mission mapping with people, helping them find their vision and mission, cast that out and create a brand for themselves or their business around it, is that many times they don't know what their purpose is.
Right.
And so sitting down and creating a plan for themselves or walking through these 12 principles is very difficult because they just don't know where to start.
Yes.
How do you help people find their actual purpose?
Well, so one of the things that, from my experience, that helped me is really tuning in and on what is my gift. You know, what is that thing that I do that whenever I do it, it's labor intensive, but it gives me fulfillment.
Right.
And then people tend to always respond positively when you do it. So once like for me, it was speaking. When I went through this period where, yes, I'm in this corporate job, I'm having success, but I'm miserable, I started honing in, you know, what is it that I do that I really enjoyed? Oh, it's when I was a corporate trainer and I was standing up in front of people teaching. Oh, man, I could just do that all day, every day. And I just started focusing on how do I do that more?
Right.
And so my advice to the viewers would be to find that gift, and everybody has one. And how can you operate in it more? And when you start operating in your gift, you find that more opportunities start coming for you to operate in your gift.
Right.
And we talked during the break that for me, I thought that I was waiting on the right opportunity.
Right.
But in reality, that opportunity was waiting on me.
Right.
It was waiting on me to get clear. So that's one thing. Start with the gift and then find different ways that you can practice and cultivate that gift.
Right. But, you know, regarding procrastination or time and timing in life, I've heard people say, well, if this is not happening in my life right now, it's because it wasn't supposed to happen, and that whatever is happening today is the way that it should be. If it were supposed to be something different, then it would be. How do you respond to that?
Well, you have to take ownership. You know, you have to take ownership for where you are. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the amount of action and activity it takes to get to where we want to be. And so the other thing, as we're talking about this idea of purpose and finding it, and I talk about this in the book, if you do exercises where you can kind of fast forward to the future, and this is going to sound a little strange, but if someone wants to get clear on what their purpose is write a letter to yourself, but write it from 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, and have it be at your ideal place. So it would be, hey, Eric, it's me. I am a best-selling author, and I speak all around the world. So what are those specific things? And then you'll be surprised. So if you do it 5 years later, a lot of those things you'll find come to pass.
Right.
So.
How did you narrow down, I guess, on the actual authors that you really like? Because as I mentioned, and I've known this about you, that you have read a lot. How do you choose which authors you want to listen to or hear from?
Well, so I look at topics that, you know, I see that people are challenged with, you know, topics that are like time management, motivation, those types, like Willie Jolly. I read his book, Your Setback is a Setup for a Comeback.
Yeah.
And that really, I'm like, wow, that really changed the way I looked at moving forward and just looking at some of those stories. So if I can identify with the author and a lot of the struggles that they went through, because, you know, a lot of times you see someone that's at a certain point and you think, oh, he's got it made. Oh, yeah, it's a piece of cake for him. He's just a natural.
Yeah.
But when you can identify with the author and the particular struggle that he went through, so I try to find authors that I can identify with, and then I do topics that I'm interested in. That's how I.
Right. I mean, and you mentioned that you yourself moving from being in that corporate job that you were in to actually being back on the stage as a motivational speaker and working with people. How long did that process take for you, and was it painful?
Yes, it was very painful. because I went through kind of those moments where I really still wasn't clear
Right.
on I knew what I was doing at that time wasn't it. But so it was, I mean, it took years. It took years.
Did you bump around?
Yes. So at one point, I thought I was going to do pharmaceutical sales.
Oh,
right? Because
okay.
a lot of my friends were in pharmaceutical sales.
Right.
And that was kind of the in thing at that time. And I
Right.
remember I went to like a career coach, and he said, "Who in their right mind would hire you to do pharmaceutical sales?" That's what he said to me, really.
Really?
And that was like a wake-up call. And he was like, "Eric, what do you really want to do?"
But you're a great communicator. I could see where you would have drawn the conclusion.
That's what I
that-
said. But for some reason, he
Well,
didn't see that.
Are you happy that he pointed you in a
Yes.
new direction?
Yes. I was upset with him for a while after that because he was not nice to me at all. He was like, "You are just wasting my time here because no one in their right mind is going to hire you to do pharmaceutical sales.
Right.
So you need to figure out what it is you want to do." I mean, that's how he was talking to me. And that actually helped me
And
to
when
get
you,
to where I am.
But when you got on the stage, were you afraid? Did you have that fear?
Oh, certainly. Certainly.
And how did you move through that? Because as you said, fear can be a number one buckler for people and their knees knocking and they decide that they're just not going to, move forward. How did you overcome it?
Just learning different ways to practice.
Right.
I just, when I was more nervous, the less prepared I was. So like if it's something I found out about, like say short notice, then I'm really more nervous. But if I know I can put in the work and the preparation, there's always a level of nerves.
Right.
But when you're prepared, the more you're prepared, the less you have to fear.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the pastor who might have that sermon in his back pocket. Do you have a speech in your back pocket that you can whip out when you need to?
Well, yeah, I have talking points. Yeah, and so one of the evolutions is when I first started, I was a lot more scripted, and I would literally write everything out.
Right.
Where now I'm kind of talking points, and I like to talk based off of my experience and be conversational.
Right. How long did it take you to write this book?
So we talk about procrastination.
Right.
6 years. It took me 6 years to write a book about overcoming procrastination.
Right. And what was the holdup? You didn't know what to put in it, or you didn't like what you
Some of it was kind of the perfectionist thing. I just wasn't happy with it, the way it turned out. But some of it was I would get new information.
Right.
I would talk to somebody, or I would do a speech, and after the speech, someone would say something. I'm like, "Oh man, that's just
Right.
great. I have to change that chapter
Yeah.
of the book. I have to go in a different direction because." So there was an element of prudence in it too. That it took 6 years to write the book.
Right. I mean, we can laugh now about people who might procrastinate in life, but it can be a serious issue for people.
Yes.
And people can really have challenges with feeling as if they have not done enough with their life, feeling behind the curve, if you will,
Right.
Compared to their peers.
Yes.
Feeling, hopeless, like it's just too late to jump in the game. I mean, I'm always inspired when I see someone who's, 65 who decides to go back to medical school and they do it and they become a doctor and they don't care that they've, got fewer years to practice, but they're happy. But for people who are dealing with the issues that might come along with procrastination, you being in ministry as a deacon, how do you work with them?
Well, again, you just try to get them to move from where they are. Because a lot of times we beat ourselves up over the past, and we have a lot of regrets over what could have been or decisions that we made that didn't play out like we thought. The key is just you really just have to move forward.
Right.
You just have to keep moving forward, and you just never know what the next day is going to bring. And it's really hard to say that something is forever off the table. I know there's a man, he's 91 years old and just went over in a fraternity, a college fraternity.
Nice.
It was a graduate chapter, but 91 years old.
Right.
And I'm sure everybody told him, "Oh, you're too old. But that's something he always wanted to do.
Right. Do you have any tips then for finding your purpose?
Well, yeah, again, what are you passionate about? A lot of times, passion and purpose are linked.
Yeah, so you said earlier writing that letter to yourself and
Right.
pulling out or extracting those things that seem to be
Right.
trending in the message.
Yeah, so even if it sounds crazy, so think about like the ideal place that you want to be, and if you're thinking just whatever comes to mind, if it's I'm going to be a movie star, if I'm going to be whatever that is, write it down. Because a lot of times what first comes to mind is something that's within you,
Right.
and a lot of times your desires, those things that are desires for you, are indications of the direction that you're supposed to go in.
Do you think that this book can be done or cannot be done until you actually know your purpose?
No.
Is that a requirement?
No, I mean, I think it can help you to discover your purpose if you go through the exercises.
Right. That's awesome.
Right. And again, if you don't know right away, don't give up.
Right.
You just continue to really plug into that passion.
What else? I mean, Eric, what else have you written and been working on?
Well, so, I mean, I blog all the time.
Right.
And that's really, I think,
And you have an e-zine too, right? Or
yes, I do e-zine articles, and people are always like, hey, Eric, I want to write a book. I would recommend getting in the habit of blogging, because it really helps to organize, and it gives you kind of an outlet for the things that frustrate you. For example, you just 600 words later, 700,000 words later, now it's out on paper.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about this book being for the entrepreneurial-minded person.
Correct.
Do you have any trends of different types of entrepreneurs that you've worked with? Or, what about students? How can this help them?
Certainly.
Help them through school.
Yes. And so the funny thing, I have a lot of people that buy the book, and I'm going to give it to my son, my daughter, who's in college.
Right.
Because procrastination is huge in college.
Yeah.
Because there's so many distractions. There's so many things that can get you off track. And that's why it helps the book can help that person to focus and minimize those distractions and really keep their eye on the prize.
Right. So what I'm taking away from this conversation is, number one, that procrastination isn't a bad word, but it's definitely a time suck.
Absolutely.
That we can overcome procrastination with discipline.
Yes.
I'm hearing that, of course, purpose is very important, and that it's very difficult to move forward in a way that we're going to be happy with unless, we kind of settle in and know exactly what it is that we're called to do, whatever our gift is.
Yes.
What else should I be taking away from this conversation?
So the other thing is, I talk about attitude is like the first rung, and a lot of times we self-identify in a negative way and say, I've just always been a procrastinator. I'm such a procrastinator. Right. Oh, that's just who I am.
Right.
So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure.
That's what you did. You don't have to be that way. You can make better decisions in the future. And that's kind of goes back, we've talked earlier. A lot of times we beat ourselves up. And so the big thing I want the viewer to take away is that just because you procrastinated yesterday doesn't mean you have to today.
Right.
You can, and a lot of times you're surrounded by people that are always telling you, oh, you're always late. That's Eric the late guy.
Right.
But you can make different decisions. You don't have to wear the label.
Right. So that reframing or reshaping our perception of self sometimes is required in order for us to really behold the principles that you lay out in the book.
Yes, because if your mindset is wrong, you will not move forward.
Do you think that there's any additional secrets that people need to know about procrastination?
Well, again, it's not just someone being lazy. That's the big thing I've discovered. Most people want to succeed on some level.
Right.
No one goes home at the dinner table, wow, I'm just horrible at my job, honey. It's a wonder they keep me around. Right. People want to succeed. So there's a lot of layers to procrastination. And it's just about kind of figuring out, I talk about awareness in the book, becoming aware of what your issues are and put that plan in place to move forward.
Right. Where can people find you, Eric, if they want to have you come in, do a workshop, whip them into shape when it comes to time management?
That's right. So you can visit my website, ericmtwiggs, TWIGGS.com, ericmtwiggs.com. And to access the book, it's ericmtwiggs.com/The Discipline of Now.
Do you have a testimony?
Absolutely. I mean, my testimony is that, I went from someone who didn't know their purpose and, didn't have the passion to now I've, written a book and I'm looking to help other people. Right. And that's kind of where I want this to go, where I can touch as many lives as possible, kind of just sharing my story.
Right.
It's not easy for me. It wasn't easy for me to get to this point. But I think if I can do it, anybody that's watching right now can do it as well if they're willing to put in the work and willing to commit to the disciplines.
Right. So you're not writing this book at people, but you're having a conversation with them.
Oh, yeah. No, because I understand, because I've struggled with a lot of those things in the book. So
that's great that you've been able to overcome them, or you are being disciplined.
Absolutely.
Right?
I'm staying disciplined.
Staying disciplined.
Right.
Love it. Where can people get a copy of the book?
ericmtwigs.com/the discipline of now.
And is it all on Amazon and all
It's
other
on
places?
Amazon as well, yes.
Great. I'm sure people have been
Yes.
saying wonderful things about it. I can't say enough about it. I think it's a great publication.
Thank you.
I, again, thank you so much for pouring your time and effort into a book like this, which is very helpful. And it's unique. And like you said, it's a quick read in each session, although it might take quite a time to complete it.
Right.
So again, Eric, thank you so much for being on Think Big with us.
Thank you, Akia, and thank you for all you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Think Big. I'm your host, Akia Garnett. Visit us online at akiagarnett.com/Think Big. You can find past episodes there and also information about various guests that have been on, upcoming events that they may have coming up, and also read our blog there as well. Again, akiagarnett.com. See you next time.